I don't think that Trump's lawyers ever quite said it that clearly. If the act is legal, covering it up can't be illegal. It's that simple. It might have been foolish to cover it up, just as it might have been foolish to do whatever it was that led to the story. But as you said, this was a criminal case, and it somehow went off on the morality of what was going on. And I can see how a jury would be confused by that. Let me just stop and make this important point. This is an election fraud case. That's how the prosecutors described it.
Right.
This is election fraud, pure and simple, they said in the opening statement. But all of this, everything Trump did, happened after the election.
Trump's people.
Trump's people.
This all happened after the election because it says January 2017, start $35,000 a month, January 2017. The election was in 2016.
You can't have election fraud after the election.
So this happened after the election. These business records that they got him on for election fraud happened after the election.
Yes.
How can that be election fraud?
Nothing that happens after the election could be election fraud, including that.
So Dr. Phil had a legendary conversation with President Donald Trump last week, and in this video, Dr. Phil is discussing the highly controversial judicial travesty with attorney Rod Phelan that led to Donald Trump being convicted in the Stormy Daniels hush money trial, of which nobody knows the actual crime that he committed that somehow led to Donald Trump being convicted of a felony of which he faces sentencing on July 11th, which is just 4 days before the Republican National Convention, where they officially name the Republican candidate that will be on the 2024 ballot. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always been under the impression that Dr. Phil and the majority of his audience were Trump-hating Democrats, to say it simply. And maybe that's just because people only see Trump in the way the mainstream media presents him, which now Rachel Maddow is claiming that she's worried about being targeted in Trump's second term, so she's not going to have any good things to say about him, like she ever really did, but she's going to double down even harder because she believes, or she's at least outwardly expressing, that Donald Trump is going to come get her. Maybe that's just her guilty conscience or her trying to play the victim, which gets views for her. Regardless, we know that the mainstream media is not doing Trump any favors, and they never really have. But it's finally happening. Trump is making his rounds, going on interviews with people like Tim Pool and Dr. Phil and a bunch of others. It would be great to see him go on Joe Rogan. But he's just having real conversations, showing people the side of Trump that the mainstream media does not want you to see, because ultimately, for them, Donald Trump is the boogeyman. They want to fearmonger and lie to the public so that they'll be scared to vote for Donald Trump. They'll go in and vote for Joe Biden and continue to lead us down a path of never-ending wars, World War III potentially, which is pretty much already going, right? But check out part of this conversation between Dr. Phil and attorney Rod Phelan. This is from Fill in the Blanks. That's Dr. Phil's YouTube channel. I'll go ahead and post a video link in the description if you want to see the whole thing.
Okay, so if I go in a store and buy something, whatever it is, a pair of socks, pay the money, I got the receipt, I own the socks, and then I go through a lot of machinations to cover up having bought those socks, does buying those socks become illegal?
Well, on the prosecutor's theory, yes, but I think we could come up with a better analogy to make the point.
Well, I'm trying to keep this G-rated here, but the act was not illegal. I'm trying to figure out how covering up something that wasn't illegal makes it illegal.
You're absolutely right. It doesn't. But what the state argued was that Trump created business records that misdescribed what had happened. Trump or his people created those records. And there's a statute in New York that the only one that he was charged with violating, which makes it a crime to falsify business records for the purpose of concealing or committing another crime. So they said that when Trump or his people misdescribed the payment for silence, they were violating this business records statute. That was the argument, and that argument prevailed.
So they said that what he did was he violated a business records statute.
With the documentation of his payment that was reimbursing the payment to Stormy.
Okay, which was legal.
Which was legal. Paying Stormy was legal, but when his lawyer Cohen did that, reimbursing Cohen for paying Stormy was legal.
Okay, we've got People's Evidence 35 and 36 up here in the screen, and this is showing what they put up that covered his reimbursement, okay? And he was reimbursed $410,000?
Yeah, I think it got to 420 or 430 somehow, but.
Okay, so it got to 420. We've got a bonus, then 180, 180. This looks like 420 down there. You're right, use 420 divided by 12, $35,000 a month. That's the right number, correct?
That is how much they agreed to pay Cohen after the election in 2017.
Okay.
Let me just stop and make this important point. This is an election fraud case. That's how the prosecutors described it.
Right.
This is election fraud, pure and simple, they said in the opening statement. But all of this, everything Trump did, happened after the election.
Trump's people.
Trump's people.
This all happened after the election because it says January 2017, start $35,000 a month, January 2017. The election was in 2016.
You can't have election fraud after the election.
So this happened after the election. These business records that they got him on for election fraud happened after the election.
Yes.
How can that be election fraud?
Nothing that happens after the election could be election fraud, including that.
And if you guys enjoy content like this, make sure you do. Please hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps the channel out.
Okay. Also, there's been a big flap about the judge said it didn't have to be unanimous. That's how you interpret it. It did have to be 12-0, but what he was saying is it didn't have to be unanimous about what the second crime was. They did have to be 12-0. They just didn't have to be 12-0 on what the second crime was. It could be 4 for this, 4 for something else, 4 for something else. Now, I've never heard of that, but apparently in New York, that is allowable. Is that right?
I think there's a big debate about that. I think that's going to be a point on appeal because New York, like every other state and like every federal court, requires jury unanimity in a criminal case. You can't have a 10-2 verdict like we have in Texas state court cases. You got to have all 12. And if you don't, you have a hung jury. So the issue was whether if you say, if all 12 of you think this guy did something wrong, but you don't agree about what it was that he did wrong, can you convict him? And the judge said, yes, you can. And I don't know how that will ultimately be answered, but my instinct is that's wrong, that they all had to agree on at least one of the 3 allegedly criminal second acts in order to convict him. It would be, here's a simple way to look at it. Let's suppose somebody is arrested and tried for murder and bank robbery, and the jury says, we don't know which one of these he did, but he did one of them, guilty. I don't think that verdict would result in a sentencing. I think that would be a mistrial.
So you think them not specifying the second crime could be a point of appeal?
I do. And the judge, to avoid the possibility of this confusion, did not ask the jury special questions, special interrogatories. Do 12 of you think that Trump intended to violate the federal election code? Do 12 of you think he intended to violate New York election law? Do 12 of you think he intended to violate the federal tax laws? He did not ask that, so we're left without knowing whether 12 of them agreed that he did any of those crimes.
What was the second crime that they convicted him on?
Well, they got a choice of 3 things. One was that he violated New York election law
Mhm.
by unlawfully paying Stormy to promote Trump's election.
Okay, so violating New York election law.
Yes.
Okay.
The second one was violating federal election law by not reporting the payment to Stormy or to Cohen, and it wasn't clear which they were saying, as a campaign expense. The government said that this, when you paid Stormy or reimbursed Cohen, that was a campaign expense. And under federal law, you have to report campaign expenses. And the third choice that the judge gave the jury in the charge was that Trump violated the federal tax laws. And this one is the strangest of all. The federal tax law violation was said to be giving Cohen a 1099. That's a tax form that says to the recipient, you've received this much income, and the government gets a copy of it, and the government knows that he has to pay tax on that. So the violation was said to be $130,000 of the amount that Trump paid to Cohen was just to reimburse him for the amount he had paid to Stormy, which was $130,000. But Trump's organization gave Cohen a 1099 for that $130,000. And Cohen paid taxes on it. So Cohen ended up paying more taxes than he owed because he didn't owe taxes on that $130,000. But once he got a 1099, he had to pay taxes on it. So the crime was you gave Cohen a false 1099, treating his income something that wasn't income. It resulted in Cohen's overpaying his taxes. The government is better off for it, but you are a criminal because that 1099 was fake.
So if they get him on that one, it's for causing someone to pay too much tax.
Yes.
So if we back up and say paying hush money is not a crime, then how does this case ever get out of the starting blocks? How does it ever go day one?
It is stillborn.
There's no case.
There's no case. What happened here, though, is that these prosecutors don't care. They wanted, in my view, this is just my opinion, they wanted a judgment. They wanted a conviction. They don't care if they get reversed. They got an election coming up. If they can get a conviction before the election, they win. If he gets reversed thereafter, so what?
They don't care. So this judge, Mershon, warned Trump that if he testifies, he can be cross-examined about E. Jean Carroll, defamation and sexual assault verdicts, about breaching Mershon's gag order, and about getting hit for $450 million in the Attorney General's civil case. So he says, you can take the stand if you want, but I'm allowing them to cross-examine you about E. Jean Carroll's defamation and sexual assault verdicts.
About a whole bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with this case, but is really stinky.
That's not probative of anything concerning this case. It's not probative of violating Business Records Act.
Yes.
So allegedly assaulting someone in a dressing room in a department store, what does that have to do with business records?
Yeah.
Nothing.
That's right.
So it's not probative of anything concerning this case for the jury to hear, but it certainly is prejudicial in saying you're not a nice guy.
Dirty games, dirty games, dirty games. I'm going to cut it off right there. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. I will be adding the link to this full video in the description if you want to check it out. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you guys in the next one.